Tuesday, I thought it would be interesting to briefly address monster songs. Now, you might be wondering, didn't a previous minion discuss one song in particular that revolved around monsters, and it was called the Monster Mash? And I believe it was Spider Queen minion Michelle who was responsible for that. Well, yes, it is a monster song because, again, that does mention monsters in it. But it doesn't really address the monsters in a very unique or interesting way. It's more about the concept of Halloween, of people just celebrating and having a good time. And the people that are celebrating and having a good time happen to be monsters, but they're not really the focus. They're more of the background as to what really the song is about. So these songs in particular are ones that sort of address a monster or a figure of Halloween that we like to associate with, and they sort of reflect onto what that monster is or what that monster does. So again, and this is more broader into what we would classify as a monster, because again, not everything that I'm going to address is probably going to sway to a way of saying, yes, this is a monster and then this is not. But I'll do my best to basically explain my reasonings behind why I chose these songs in particular. So without further ado, let me get started. The first song that I wanted to briefly mention is called Witchy Woman by the Hollies. Yes, the song is very, very cool. It has a great edge to it. It's very slow, but at the same time, it's very kind of seductive in a way. And it also gives off an eerie effect that we would associate with a witch. And basically, that's what this song is about. The song is about a witch. It discusses the witch in probably, I think, the most perfect detail that a song could describe a witch. Because within even the chorus it goes, ooh, ooh, witchy woman, see how high she flies. And it really expresses the aspects of a witch that we would associate with the moon, or having the moon in the background. Those things really bring out what we would associate with as a witch. And I like the idea of the witch being someone who's a little bit more sneaky. The witch is not as out there like a monster like Frankenstein. The witch is very tricksy, and she's got spells and all that stuff and magic. So there is this sense of making the witch a little bit more working behind the scenes, so to speak, as opposed to being out there and really popping out and scaring people. So that's why I think this song really reflects the witch well, both instrumentally as well as within the lyrics. So I think it's definitely a song worth recommending if you're interested in having monster songs play for a party list this Halloween season. Now, the next song that I wanted to briefly mention is called The Werewolves of London by Warren Zevon. And the interesting thing about this song is it sounds a lot like a Lynyrd Skynyrd song. I'm not going to deny that this song probably took a lot of inspiration from that southern rock genre. But regardless, it's a very kind of goofy yet interesting way in approaching werewolves. As opposed to the first song that I mentioned that just discusses one person in particular, one witch. Apologize for the camera shaking there. It discusses multiple werewolves and how they're sort of on the run, causing havoc and problems. And it also expresses the appetite of a werewolf. Werewolves are known for having a very aggressive hunger streak. They're not like witches where they sort of play around with you and mess with your head. I think that's probably why witches are usually associated as being women. But werewolves, usually werewolves we associate with men playing them, and I think it's safe to say there's sort of a reasoning behind that, and I think that's largely due to the werewolf having like a big appetite, and you know the saying, "Way through a man's heart through his stomach." And it's sort of the song sort of encapsulates that idea of the werewolf being hungry, the werewolf causing problems as a result of being hungry, and it's really intended to address that. And I think really the genre that it's set in, again, the southern rock genre, I think really works, and there's a lot of fun instrumentals that go around. Even the narrator mentions him encountering werewolves at one point, and the ow ooh that plays as he's singing. I think it's the chorus when he goes ow, and says "Werewolves of London." It really brings out that nature that we would associate with a werewolf. Even though Witchy Woman doesn't have that hey or something like that playing in the background, this one kind of goes all more out to showcase the monster as someone who is out there and causing a frenzy. So it's really designed to be that kind of a song, whereas Witchy Woman, again, is a little bit more subdued, and it's a lot more designed to be mysterious. But Werewolves of London is really a song that's like kind of in your face, but not as edgy, not as aggressive sounding, but within the lyrics you do get the sense of the werewolf really having this kind of appetite. So I think that's definitely a song that's worth recommending. Now, the third song that I wanted to briefly mention is called Dracula's Deuce by the Ghouls. This song talks about Dracula and what Dracula does and his sort of thirst for blood, sort of similar to the werewolf song that I mentioned previously, where they sort of discuss the appetite of werewolves. But the interesting thing is again, it's kind of in that more traditional kind of pop genre. It's very sort of old-timey, I guess you could say, and it's the funny thing is this song places Dracula as sort of a racer, and that he races for blood basically. So it's kind of like his fuel. And unlike the Witchy Woman song, it's very light and upbeat, and I like too how the vocalist does sound like Dracula. He does sound like that monster that we would associate with. So I think that makes the song all the more fun. It's very goofy, unlike the previous songs that I mentioned that are a little bit more I mean, Werewolves of London can get a little goofy at times, but this one, I think, expresses itself both within the lyrics and both within the instrumentals as to how kind of goofy and out there it is. And I think it's definitely worth recommending. It's sort of similar, I think you could say, to the Monster Mash in that it's very just light and just kind of just fun and just goofy. But despite that, again, it focuses purely on Dracula, and it focuses its energy on trying to display what Dracula sort of is as a monster. So I think for that, it's definitely worth a recommendation. Now, the second song that I wanted to briefly mention is very interesting monster song, because it's not designed like the other songs to sort of express the monster itself. It's more designed to be a sort of metaphor. And that song is Skeletons by Stevie Wonder. The sort of pop R&B kind of vibe that it gives, I think, really suits the song well. and it gives it this kind of edge, you know, and it does make you think like of skeletons in that way, because again, skeletons are kind of, you know, they're sort of, I guess you could say, edgy because they've got no skin, so they don't have the flow or anything. So I think with this kind of instrumental that it has going for it, I think really works to the song's advantage. And the interesting thing is even though it's not describing skeletons as um, as the monsters themselves, it sort of describes um, what what skeletons bring in the form of a metaphor, and that metaphor is lying. The song discusses like lying and how it's eating away at him, and sort of, you know, it's really the skeletons in his closet, and the skeletons are kind of following him around, and you know, it's like a huge burden onto him, because you know how they say a lie grows and grows and grows. um, and I think that's very interesting, and it really comes off effectively, because initially people, I think, would expect this song to be about how skeletons are scary and intimidating and such. But when you really look more into the lyrics, it's about using skeletons as a metaphor, and really what the skeleton sort of represents as a monster within a metaphor. And that metaphor is lying. And you know, if a skeleton is following you around, um, it's designed to be sort of, you know, something that's haunting you, and the lie is really the monster. So the lie equals skeletons, and and the and the skeletons equals the monster. So the monster really, even though it is lying, I think the song does a really interesting job of sort of connecting this idea of a skeleton being sort of um, something that's a very monstrous within us, and what can be monstrous within us. And I think that that concept is, again, things like lying. And this song, I think, really encapsulates it very well. And again, it has sort of this irony to it, because it's very upbeat. It's not very dark or mysterious. It's just kind of, you know, it just has this kind of irony, I guess you could say, to it, to the point where, you know, when Stevie Wonder's singing, he's just kind of happy. He's not really all that in distress or whatnot. So again, I think it's trying to, you know, play around with itself and not take itself too seriously, but at the same time kind of address a very interesting metaphor as to what skeletons can represent. So I think it's something definitely worth recommending, and again, literally focuses in on one particular monster. The second to last song that I wanted to briefly mention is called Feed My Frankenstein by Alice Cooper, and oh my, this song. I can understand why some might be deterred from this song in particular, because it's very, very, very goofy and edgy at the same time. And it's a very 80s party song, so if you don't like 80s party rock songs, actually, in particular, this probably won't be in your taste. But it really, I think, brings something out that's just very over the top, and just very it's over the top to the point where I can't help but enjoy it. It's it's designed to be a song about Frankenstein, like you can see by the title. But the interesting thing is that he's sort of the vocalist is sort of describing himself, by, you know, saying "feed my Frankenstein." And again, it talks sort of about the hunger that we would associate with Frankenstein. Even though Frankenstein, unlike the werewolf and Dracula, even though he doesn't really necessarily eat people, at least within certain, even though we don't believe or associate him with eating people, that's probably not what fictional people who've encountered Dracula, or excuse me, encountered Frankenstein, think that he is. I think that if we were to take out the context into which Frankenstein, sort of a misunderstood monster, and we go into what people who've maybe are, again, the fictional idea of Dracula and the fear surrounding him, I think a large part of that fear was the fact that he could potentially eat people, or the idea that Frankenstein is a monster. And the idea behind a monster is, again, to kind of associate them with this similar things like, or similar monsters like the werewolf and Dracula. So I think there's just I think that's just kind of what the song's going for. It's not designed to be sort of a representation of the monster, but what people think about when they think about the monster. And not so much into the context of what we know, but what people who've maybe encountered Frankenstein believe they think Frankenstein is. So again, it's sort of hard to explain, but it's purely just designed to be this very edgy yet kind of fun song that's very, very rock and roll heavy. It pushes sort of the envelope of just how kind of crazy and nonsensical it is. But I think it works. I think it creates a very over the top edge that we don't really see with a lot of these kinds of monster songs. And I think it makes itself a very interesting song at that. So you could take it for what it's worth. You could probably say that it's one of my guilty pleasures, but I think it's fun for what it offers, and it's a good pottery song, so what can you say? Now, the last song that I'm going to briefly mention is actually a song that we don't really associate with when it comes to Halloween, in particular the monster that it discusses. But regardless of that, I still think that it holds up into something that we would associate with when it comes to Halloween and when it comes to monsters in general. And that is The Purple People Eater by Sheb Wooley. This song, like the Dracula's Deuce song, is a little it's a little more upbeat. It's a little bit more catchy, and it's not the Purple People Eater is not a typical monster that we associate with Halloween. But again, I think it's sort of similar to the way that we would associate aliens with Halloween. Sometimes we consider them to be part of Halloween because, again, they're kind of horror related, and we've had movies that sort of reflect this. But we don't really consider them like the traditional horror monsters. So this is sort of an untraditional kind of monster. And the interesting thing too is it doesn't present itself in a very threatening way. It really just describes the monster's appearance, and just what how strange it is, how just bizarre it looks, and it's not really designed to be like in your face or threatening or mysterious. It's just really just designed to be a song that's just about being fun and catchy and not really trying to take itself, I think, too seriously, or at least not present itself in, I think, a very over-the-top way. But I think it's definitely one of those fun monster songs, and kind of resembles something that we would hear on Halloween. So I think it's definitely worth recommending, and I remember hearing this song when I was very little in like grade school, and I don't think kindergarten, but still at a fairly young age. And I remember it being one of those really catchy ones that that I still remember to this day. So I think it only serves well that I mention those songs, or mention that one song in particular. But ultimately, I think that's really all I can say about all of these songs. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope I did my job. I don't think I'm going to be back for another video, but if I am, then that's great. But I hope you all have a pleasant month of Halloween and a pleasant day, week, month, and year. And I wish you all a good bye-bye.